Welcome and thank you for being here. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something important. By pressing play, you've already raised your hand and said yes to growth, to curiosity, and to building something meaningful in this next chapter of your life. My name is Adam Torres. Over the past decade, I've had the privilege of working at the intersection of media, business, and entrepreneurship, launching hundreds of podcast shows, producing thousands of episodes, and having conversations with founders, executives, investors, and creators from all over the world. Along the way, I've seen firsthand how podcasting has quietly become one of the most powerful tools for building authority, trust, and long-term opportunity. This book was born out of those conversations. 1 Billion Podcasts, The Future of All Media, isn't about chasing downloads, fame, or becoming an influencer overnight. It's about understanding the shift that's happening right now in media and how podcasting is becoming the next great platform for voices that want to lead, educate, and create impact. Whether you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, a creator, or someone who simply knows you have a message worth sharing, this audiobook is designed to help you see podcasting not as a trend, but as an ecosystem and a long-term asset. So I invite you to settle in, listen with an open mind, and think bigger than tactics. Think in terms of leverage, legacy, and scale. This is 1 Billion Podcasts, The Future of All Media. Let's begin. Dedication. To my mom, I'm continuing your work. Preface. Podcasts are this generation's media gold rush. The goal of this book is to change your life, to open your eyes to the opportunity of a lifetime. My thesis is simple. There will be over 1 billion podcasts streaming, and those who start a successful podcast now will create generational wealth. I don't think it's an accident that you picked up this book. You are destined for great things. Keep reading with an open mind and heart, and you just might be surprised by a newfound urge to start your own show. If you already have a show, I hope to open your eyes to the fact that this podcasting goldmine is much deeper than you ever imagined. Being able to spot trends in media while acting on them has made many people rich. In the past, media titans controlled the flow of information. People like Ted Turner, who founded CNN in 1980, creating the first 24-hour global news network, and Rupert Murdoch, who launched Fox News in 1996, influenced what content would be viewed by the masses. Later, social media owners like Mark Zuckerberg, who started Facebook in 2004, controlled the narrative with algorithms that created the echo chambers of our existence. Most recently, TikTok, which made its international debut in 2016, vies for our attention with a highly addictive algorithm and user experience. What do all these companies have in common? The people who started them all became fabulously wealthy by finding ways to gain attention while providing value. Isn't it time for you to be ahead of the trend in media and cash in? Podcasting is the answer. In the podcasting business, I wear many hats that I believe qualify me as a trusted source for information related to podcasting. My primary role is as a host. I've conducted over 6,000 interviews and host 8 different podcasts with more shows in development, both for audio only and on-screen formats. As co-founder of Mission Matters Media, which launched more than 250 podcasts and boasts a 40-plus show podcast network, I have a unique vantage point in the world of podcasting that fuels my work as a podcast futurist and a global speaker. My personal mission is to encourage and inspire others to participate in the podcast industry, which has completely changed my life. I want people to get in the game, to let their voices be heard. Being a podcast futurist, I'm constantly asked questions about podcasting and how to grow a new show. But the number one question I get, whether it's as a guest at a dinner party or from a potential podcast host considering launching a show is, isn't the podcast space too saturated now? When I hear those words, I take a deep breath, count to 3 in an attempt to contain my excitement, and then I begin to explain how the full potential of podcasting hasn't even begun to be realized. I'll spend the duration of these pages and the attention you have given to me laying out my case and showing you how to take part in the biggest wealth generating media opportunity of our time and grow your brand to become a successful podcaster. Chapter 1: Podcasting is the next YouTube and you're early. This is your crash course on the history of podcasting and my predictions for its future. My central thesis is that there will be 1 billion podcasts. To make my point, I like to compare the growth of YouTube to podcasting, as podcasting is following a similar growth path. Don't believe me? Keep reading. YouTube was launched in 2005 and now ranks as the second largest search engine on the internet and the #1 platform for video content. There are over 115 million channels overall, and roughly 60 million YouTube channels upload content monthly. One of the reasons for this growth dates back to 2007, when YouTube launched its YouTube Partner Program, which rewards creators for creating content. The use of dynamic advertising, which allows ads to be inserted automatically into episodes, meant that creators could focus on creating the content and be rewarded financially without spending time or money on direct ad sales or brand partnerships. Almost from the beginning, there was an incentive for people to upload content. How does this compare to the origins of podcasting? The early version of podcasts emerged around 2003, a product of the online radio stations that begun around the same time. The podcast format was not very accessible. Unlike YouTube, which had a single central platform where videos could be easily viewed, podcasts required a manual, technical process to find and listen to. Users had to find the RSS feed for the show, download the audio, and convert it to an MP3 file, which they could listen to on their computer or MP3 player. The real turning point for podcasts came in 2005 when Apple integrated podcast subscriptions into its iTunes platform. This led to mainstream adoption, allowing the masses to tune in with minimal effort. Although listenership was up and podcasts were more user-friendly, monetizing a podcast was still a challenge. Why? YouTube had its partner program, which ensured that people got paid if they got qualified views. Podcasts were fragmented with no central advertisers or platforms. Think of it this way. Every single podcast launched was equivalent to starting a new radio station. Each show had to be its own small business to start. This meant advertising needed to be sold to fund production, staff, etc. For shows that had a large enough following, advertising could be sold, which fueled additional production and led to longevity. But what about for the little guy? What about the hobbyists without technical knowledge, the ones who just wanted to create? How were they rewarded? On YouTube, this type of hobbyist was rewarded with monetization. In the podcast world, assuming the hobbyist could get a sponsor, which was not very likely, this type of creator had one real option: host-read ads. This meant a host would read an ad for a sponsor, and the advertisement was baked into the episode. This type of advertising had one clear disadvantage for podcasters. An advertisement could only be sold once per episode because the ad was baked in. YouTube offered what was known as dynamic advertising. With it, the host does not need to read the ad mid-video because it's automatically inserted into the video by the platform. Additionally, the ad is automatically changed without any additional work from the creator. This meant that a YouTube creator could create a video, and as long as people were watching it, they had the opportunity to earn. No sales, no host reading an ad, no hassle, just create. If people watched, you got paid. At this point, you're probably saying to yourself, okay, Adam, so why do you want me to start a podcast? YouTube seems to be the way to go. Stick with me a little longer and we'll get there. Also, I never said not to create on YouTube. In fact, YouTube began allowing dedicated podcast pages in 2024. But I stand by my thesis. There will be 1 billion podcasts, and the real opportunity lies in capitalizing on the wave of current and future growth in the podcasting space. The real turning point for podcasts was the widespread adoption of dynamic advertising. For the first time, podcasters had the same advantages as YouTube creators. This meant podcasters could monetize back catalogs of content and earn revenue from otherwise dormant assets. Additionally, new creators would be rewarded when people listened to their content without having to employ salespeople, read ads, or figure out a hybrid of the old radio station model on their way to profitability. A host could just create, distribute, and get paid. In 2005, when Apple added podcasts, there were fewer than 5,000 available podcasts. That number grew to over 100,000 by 2013. In 2013, dynamic advertising was introduced into the podcasting world. The tipping point for dynamic advertising adoption was around 2021, accounting for up to 84% of podcast ad revenue. By then, podcast growth had exploded, reaching over 2 million podcasts. Dynamic advertising completely changed the game. And as of 2025, there are over 4 million podcasts available worldwide. Okay, Adam, I thought you said the podcasting market wasn't saturated. There are over 4 million now. I should have started back in 2005 when there were fewer than 5,000. It's too late now, says the skeptical naysayer. If this is what your internal self-talk is telling you, get your head back in the game or hand this book to someone else. I told you there was going to be 1 billion podcasts. This game is just starting to get interesting with only 4 million in existence. Think about YouTube. If there were only 4 million YouTube channels in the world and you knew with 100% certainty that the platform would grow to 150 million channels, would you have started a channel? Or would you have let that opportunity pass you by? This book you are holding in your hand is your time machine into the future, giving you a glimpse into one of the biggest opportunities in media for anyone who has ever wanted to create. Key takeaways. Podcasting is one of the most important media trends today, and those who start shows now will have the opportunity to build generational wealth. The early days of podcasting were difficult for creators and listeners, which held back growth in the space. The introduction of dynamic advertising has led to explosive growth in the podcasting industry and will continue to fuel the growth to 1 billion podcasts. Chapter 2, My Media Awakening. By now, you probably get the sense that I'm pretty passionate about podcasting, but this wasn't always the case. I grew up on the southwest side of Detroit, Michigan, in a time before social media. The inner city was rough, and it wasn't uncommon for me to lose classmates every year due to gang violence and other plagues that ran rampant across cities in America during the 90s. My earliest influences in media and entertainment came from hip-hop music and the young music moguls who paved the way for modern-day influencers. The first time I heard the story of Percy Robert Miller, it changed my perspective. He is more commonly known by his rapper name, Master P, and founded No Limit Records in 1991. Here was a person from the inner city who started his own record label, recorded music, and sold that music out of the trunk of his car before eventually landing a 9-figure distribution deal that would change the entire music industry model of the time. He rode a trend in entertainment and, through savvy deal-making, created generational wealth. Music was an outlet for inner-city kids, but it was also a source of hope. As early as middle school, I remember kids talking about starting record labels as a way out of the ghetto. Being musically inclined isn't one of my gifts I feel God gave me, but I had confidence. If Master P could figure out how to make it, I could too. I started out working in the trades from a very young age, doing everything from painting to manual labor, and even having my own airbrushing business. My version of taking part in the rap goldmine was airbrushing shirts for kids to wear at school. I still remember one of my best sellers was created by airbrushing the Wu-Tang logo on shirts and hoodies. It was a simple design, and as a middle schooler, I could handle the production. This was also the first time I could remember having the feeling of satisfaction from watching other people enjoy something I created. While Master P's success fueled my early curiosity in media and entertainment, Cash Money Records and Dwayne Michael Carter Jr., known professionally as Lil Wayne, made me feel like anything was possible. Cash Money Records duplicated the success of Master P, securing a 9-figure distribution deal that put them on the map. Lil Wayne was my age, and he was also from a neighborhood where outsiders weren't welcome. At this point, I was searching for my version of a big break that would give me access and a vantage point beyond my neighborhood. My break came during a discussion with a guidance counselor at Cass Technical High School. An internship was opening up at Roney & Co., which was later acquired by Raymond James and Associates. It was for a position in their IRA department. If I got the role, I would not be able to participate in any high school activities because my afternoons would be spent at work. The schedule required that I go to my regular classes in the morning and then spend the second half of the day at the firm. This was 1998, prior to the tech wreck that devastated the market. Companies were launching daily, and anything with a .com at the end of the name seemed to be a recipe for printing money. I knew people where I come from don't get many redos in life, so I applied, interviewed, and got the job. I was reading more about the financial markets and watching the news. My understanding of the power of media was beginning to develop. I saw how stories could literally move financial markets, how they make and break fortunes. My perspective was changing, but I was keenly aware of my lack of understanding and experiences outside of Detroit. I needed to become more worldly. My number one goal in college was to travel. Finance and business I felt I'd learn on the job after college. I majored in international relations at James Madison College at Michigan State University. Studying abroad and getting credits for it became my obsession. I did programs in Mexico, Spain, and Belgium, and visited many countries in between. I'm pretty sure there were very few of my immediate relatives, if any, who had even visited Europe at that time. If I were to talk to people in my neighborhood and say I was going to France, it would be like saying I was going to the moon. People from my neighborhood just didn't do things like that. Through travel and education, I had access to media and world politics from a different angle. When studying in Brussels, one of my professors was Jamie Shea, a spokesperson for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, in the 90s. Jamie was known for highlighting the consequences of inaction relating to the Srebrenica massacre in 1995. Using that conflict as a case study, he argued that a stronger NATO response was necessary in similar conflicts moving forward. He later used these lessons to explain NATO's decisive action during the Kosovo War in 1999. Understanding Jamie's work as a spokesperson and the consequences that could hang in the balance based on media coverage or lack thereof helped shape my beliefs and opinions around the importance and responsibility of the media in society. Key takeaways. If you catch the right media and entertainment wave like Master P and Cash Money Records did, generational wealth can be created. Media coverage has the power to move financial markets, creating and destroying fortunes. Media can influence governments that have the power to decide who lives and who dies. Chapter 3: Broadcasting, Books, and Magnetic Branding. My first job out of college was working for Rock Financial, which became Quicken Loans and is now known as Rocket. Rock Financial's founder and Cleveland Cavaliers owner, Dan Gilbert, came in and taught a lesson to my class of new hires. He was the first billionaire I'd met, and he made his initial fortune by being far ahead of the trend and placing a big bet. Dan saw shopping online for mortgages as the future, and he wanted to have the #1 online mortgage company. In the early days, the industry laughed at him because people were still hesitant to make online purchase with credit cards at that time. How could someone make one of their biggest financial decisions online? He was far ahead of his time and reinvested in people, technology, and the infrastructure that made his dream a reality. While at Rock Financial, I first became aware of the power of radio and branding to support the growth of conventional businesses, such as a mortgage company. Dan and his team implemented radio advertising and brand strategies over many years in the Michigan marketplace to gain significant market share. If you turned on the radio in Michigan during the Rock Financial days, it was impossible not to hear David Hall's voice. He was the undisputed, most recognized voice and pitchman for Rock Financial in the Michigan market. Through the years, I've heard his voice so many times in the radio that when I finally met him in person and was working on a team with his brother, Jason Hall, I had to do a double take. My psyche couldn't quite distinguish whether I was listening to the radio or the person that was standing in front of me. I'd effectively been brainwashed one ad at a time over the course of many years to trust a voice coming out of the speakers. This was the true power of voice and audio in the media. Empires like Rock Financial can be built on the voice of one person. I've since recognized the look I must have given him in the eyes of people I meet who are longtime listeners of my shows, but meeting me for the first time. It's almost like they can't believe I'm not in their earbuds talking. It makes me laugh every time because I know the feeling. The next pivotal moment in my media training came unexpectedly through my next role working at the Vanguard Group, founded by John C. Bogle. To this day, I am still amazed that the ideas in John's college thesis led to the founding of the Vanguard Group, which now manages over $10 trillion in total client assets. The Vanguard Group would go on to popularize indexing and mutual funds. The key lesson for me here was that words and ideas matter. Before this experience, I had never seen what one paper could do to spread ideas in an industry that led to real wealth. Another way John taught me about the power of media was through his use of books to spread, in this case, his brand of investment management. I'd read many books in every genre you could imagine, but this was the first time I was working for a large company and reading the founder's book. My young mind was indoctrinated into the culture and investment ideology. John could write a book, distribute it to his thousands of employees, who would then, in turn, regurgitate its ideas to the millions of clients they interacted with. It was magic. Before I went out on my own and became an entrepreneur, there was one more titan in finance I needed to learn from: Charles Schwab. While John C. Bogle represented an East Coast conservative perspective, Charles Schwab was from the West Coast and had a fresh, new perspective and goal. He aimed to pioneer the discount brokerage business and make investing accessible to the masses. When brokerage fees were deregulated, ending an almost 200-year tradition, many brokers raised their prices. Charles did the opposite. He chose to lower fees and design his firm to cater to the masses. Like John, Charles was able to transform the industry, and Charles Schwab now manages over $10 trillion in client assets. Two completely different approaches, both of which created companies with similar assets. Charles also used book distribution to his advantage, similar to John, by distributing to employees who would then spread the same ideas to their clients. What was unique about his positioning was his role as the company's figurehead. Bogle led with his research and mutual fund ideology. Charles led with who he was as a character and positioned himself as a crusader who was democratizing investing in the stock market. He named the company after himself. His name became a trusted brand. I had the opportunity to meet Charles Schwab once at one of the Scottsdale, Arizona locations, and he was an original influencer without social media. His positioning through books, media, and on-air appearances gave him more of a celebrity-like following compared to the type attracted to the head of a financial firm. Key takeaways. The power of radio helped build one of the largest mortgage companies in the world. Any thesis, philosophy, or ideology can be distributed and gain a following through books and mass media. Becoming a figurehead and brand for a company can attract a celebrity-like following if executed properly with the correct value proposition. Chapter 4, Becoming a Brand. Starting my own firm and attempting to walk in the footsteps of titans like John C. Bogle and Charles Schwab was one of the scariest things I'd ever done. Up to that point, I'd towed the corporate line and had been a really happy producer. My lifestyle was great. I was born on the southwest side of Detroit, Michigan, and I found myself living exactly 1 block away from one of the most famous intersections in the world, Rodeo Drive in Wilshire and the famous Beverly Hills Triangle. What led me to eventually going out on my own? The trend was shifting, and large firms like the one I worked for had too much to lose to allow a frontline employee to capitalize on what was happening on social media. Let me explain. In the early days of LinkedIn, big firms did not allow financial consultants to post on social media or build personal brands. This made sense at the time because compliance and monitoring softwares were not advanced enough to monitor companies with tens of thousands of employees. The solution for firms was simply to ban posting content related to the industry on channels like LinkedIn. If an employee couldn't post on social media about industry-related topics, of course, writing a book was out of the question. While I've never considered myself a rebel in any way, I do think of myself as a creator. Whether it was airbrushing logos that I obviously didn't own the copyright for on t-shirts as a kid, or my newfound interest in streaming and making videos. I didn't exactly go through compliance procedures when I started my first YouTube channel. Instead, I remember my boss finding out in the middle of a meeting after he realized he was the last one to find out. After working through the compliance procedures, I developed a plan that was satisfactory to the firm. I am truly grateful to all those involved for caring enough to find a solution. It really was a great place. They could have just fired me. The solution was to remove all firm branding from my LinkedIn and social media profiles. This is when I had a paradigm shift. I realized that people were doing business with me. They trusted the infrastructure and products of the large corporation I represented, but they did business with me. I was a brand. Though I had this realization, I still had no idea what I was doing. I launched my firm and tried many marketing channels. My first book, Money Matters, 21 Practical Lessons for Everyday Success, was released in 2016, the same year I founded my company. This experience was an absolute crash course in writing, marketing, and distributing a book. My mentor, Christopher Kai, taught me how to use the book as a business card. He taught by example. If you were in Beverly Hills during this time, I don't think you'd catch Chris at an event, coffee shop, or a movie premiere without his book, Big Game Hunting, Networking with Billionaires, Executives, and Celebrities, in tow. I saw the method working for him, so I followed suit. Something interesting began to happen. People began asking me if I could help them become published authors too. While I thought this was ridiculous, considering I was a financial advisor, I smelled an opportunity. If there was one thing I learned in finance, it was that if I were to pursue this new venture, I needed leverage. Marketing my own book taught me that book marketing can be a lonely road. The moment you stop promoting, sales stop, and people quickly forget the book even existed. I found the leverage I was looking for through the chicken soup for the soul model. Jack Canfield and Deepak Chopra paved the way for the anthology model of books in their series, where multiple authors contribute chapters and combine them in a single book. The secret sauce was that each author would promote it, increasing reach and increasing the likelihood that the book would continue to sell over time. I was in Kansas celebrating Christmas, and I created 2 decks. One was for a Bitcoin-inspired option trading strategy, and the other was for an anthology book series focusing on entrepreneurs and thought leaders. My thought was that one would sell, and I'd either go further into the finance space or into the branding and media space. The anthology won. After sharing the deck with colleagues, it gained traction quickly. The most important author I attracted was Chirag Sagar, who would become my co-founder in this new venture and open my eyes to the true potential of media. He came from the media and marketing space and had built a company that reached millions. I was still thinking and playing in the minor leagues. With his help, we built a community and released the first edition of our now best-selling book anthology series, Money Matters, World's Leading Entrepreneurs Reveal Their Top Tips to Success, in 2018. Promoting that book with Chirag as a partner gave me new perspective. He threw big events and filled rooms with audiences who wanted to hear the story behind the book. This was a whole new level of book promotion, which I could equate to being more like a record release out of the music industry. Not only was the book launch party the place to be, but it also featured a group of authors who contributed to the book. On any given day, at least one of the authors was promoting it online. We all shared in the work and the glory. The model was working. Though we were gaining an audience and the word was out, the real traction began when we launched the first podcast, Money Matters Top Tips with Adam Torres, also in 2018. At this point, I should mention that we still publish this best-selling series, and if you'd like to apply, then click on the link that's in the show notes. Key takeaways. You are a brand. Whether you know it or not, you are one, and that matters. Whether or not you choose to capitalize on this is up to you, but it will directly affect sales either way. Publishing a book should be the foundation of any brand. A book is your entrance ticket to the game. Implement leverage by collaborating with like-minded peers when executing branding and marketing strategies. Chapter 5. Scared but recording anyway. It's hard to explain how that first podcast started. I had zero idea what a podcast was, how they worked, or how to run a show. I spent a total of 15 minutes launching the show, and I distinctly remember coming up with the podcast cover by taking a square screenshot of the book we just released. I know, real classy. Saying that our first podcast launch was a crude and rushed endeavor would be an understatement. As a host, I didn't have any natural ability or take to the medium quickly. Instead, I just made it up as I went along. A completely improvised show with an inexperienced host doing interviews for the first time. One might think this was a recipe for disaster, especially since we'd published books and were developing a burgeoning brand. But the risk paid off. We began receiving inquiries to appear on the show, and we could see the semblance of a larger media brand beginning to develop. I've learned that the podcasting niche is actually quite forgiving. My early audience followed despite my not having the best equipment, editing, or hosting skills. If I had to describe my style in the beginning, it was that I was all heart. If you read this far and you're still wondering if you have what it takes to be a host, keep reading. If I can do it, you can too. After our show experienced some growth, I started to second guess myself. My first mistake was to deviate from my usual train of thought, which was to just go do the next interview and move on. Instead, I was looking at numbers and charts, analyzing what content worked and what didn't. Big mistake. What was once fun became drudgery. If I expected a particular guest to get a lot of downloads and they didn't, it led to a letdown and a feeling of failure. During this time, I had a mentor, Bill Taub, author of Automatic Pilot. Writing a pilot has never been so easy. He was writer for classic TV shows including NYPD Blue. I went to coffee with him and shared my dilemma with him. I told him, I just don't know if my show is any good or if I'm meant to be a host. His response shocked me. He said, Adam, are you better than when you started? Will you be better in a year? Will you be better in 5 years? How about in 10 years, assuming you don't quit? My response to all of his questions was, of course I'll be better then. He then told me, if that's the case, then present day Adam does not have the right to decide or determine how good you can get or the success of Adam in the future. You said you'd get better, so just keep going. To you holding this book, I say the same. You have no idea how much better you'll get as you learn and grow. As you continue reading, I'll reveal layers of understanding that have come to me through experience, study, and deep reflection. It's also important that you keep a sense of humor in this business. One of my favorite points I like to make, especially when someone is giving me accolades in an interview or I feel it's too much credit, is I just might be the world's worst podcaster. Come on, think about it. I've recorded over 6,000 episodes, but I'm not a household name. When the host hears that, they usually turn red or just start laughing. I even had one friend, Matt Ford, who said he was going to start a fan club for me and call it World's Worst Podcaster Club if I kept saying that in interviews. That is having fun. Be able to laugh at yourself and realize that you can always record another episode. No one episode will make or break a show. Some other key moments that prove anyone can do this if I can. My first 300 plus episodes had zero editing. I'm eternally grateful for those who still listen. I didn't do a video interview until after 1,500 interviews due to fear. I turned on a camera and my mind went blank. My first in-person interview took place after conducting 3,000 plus remote interviews. I forgot there was a camera and didn't even do an opening. I just started talking to the guest. Big thanks to Jennifer Chen, who was directing that day, for getting me through it. The first interview I did in front of a live audience was after 4,000 interviews. Once again, I forgot to do my opening and completely forgot I was in front of an audience. By the way, don't worry. Buy tickets next time I'm in your town. I promise I've gotten better. If you're starting to think, whoa, I could never do that many episodes, then you may have missed the point. You should be thinking, if Adam can do this, I can too. I can't believe he had to record that many episodes. Let me elaborate. If you can do a video call with your friends and hit the record button, you can launch a video podcast. If you can't do a video call because you don't like being on camera, that's fine. Can you make a phone call to a friend and hit the record button? Then you can launch an audio-only podcast. If you don't like talking, can you launch a podcast? Yes. You can write a script and have an AI voice read it aloud for you. In fact, my team is developing a show hosted by the AI version of me. The point is that anyone can now launch a podcast. This is why there will be 1 billion podcasts. Key takeaways. Your present day self doesn't have the right to judge your future success or ability as a host. Just keep recording. Persistence over time will win the trust of an audience, especially those who are with you from the beginning when you maybe weren't worth listening to. There aren't any more excuses for not starting a podcast. All technology barriers that existed in the past have been removed. Chapter 6, the VIP pass to content, clients, and credibility. At this point in the book, hopefully I've convinced you that you could start a podcast if you wanted to. Why should you start a podcast? This hasn't been addressed thoroughly yet. As mentioned earlier, I started my entrepreneurial journey with a self-published book that served as a business card. Becoming a published author increased my visibility and put me on stages around the world, including a speaking tour in China. Remember, I was a financial advisor, not exactly who you expect to be booked for speaking tours. We realized early on that in today's social media-driven world, a constant stream of new content is needed to keep your audience's attention. I had a book. What came next? Some people may write follow-up books and get creative with different types of programs they could sell, but I had a job helping people invest. I didn't have time to sit around and think about what kind of content I could create. Launching a podcast was the answer. One thing I knew was that I could have a conversation with people. I also knew that a quantifiable amount of time could be spent on podcasting and that a system needed to ensure an efficient amount of content for the time dedicated to the project. To me, creating my first podcast was more of a time blocking exercise and fell into the category of time management rather than a creative pursuit to add value. I was busy with my primary business, still managing money. I know some of the people reading this book are extremely busy too, but podcasting will work. Keep reading. Initially, my goal was to release one episode per week, dedicating 1 hour to the project. Well, that lasted about a day because after my first episode, I was hooked. Within a year, I was doing 70 episodes per week. But let's pretend that I had stuck with the original plan, which is more realistic for readers. Let's continue the scenario. If a person dedicates 1 hour per week to their show, that is roughly 52 episodes a year. My initial plan included this breakdown of that hour. My 1 hour per week plan: 20 to 30 minutes recording an audio-only interview, 10 minutes uploading the episode to the hosting platform. I decided not to edit them. 20 minutes writing a post and sharing the episode on LinkedIn where my primary audience lives. I was checking a lot of boxes with investing only 1 hour. I was also ensuring a weekly stream of content so people would remember me. And it was done on a shoestring budget. I still wasn't sure if podcasting mattered, so it was an experiment at best. If I could go back in time, I would have invested more money in social media, design, and distribution. We have since leveled up by creating a podcast agency that handles all the editing, social media, and distribution for our clients. If you have the budget, I suggest hiring an agency like ours. This will allow you to record more and focus all of your energy on the most important thing, the interview. If you're interested in looking at what we do, you can definitely click on the link in the show notes and it'll take you to our agency page. We'd love to have a conversation if you'd like to launch a show. With my simple 1 hour a week game plan, my visibility increased exactly as I hoped. My social media was now consistent. I wasn't stuck in the time drain world of sitting around, coming up with campaigns to get attention. My book sales increased as more people became aware of my existence. I was bringing on new clients who were listeners or who had read my book. Then something unexpected happened. Some of my guests who appeared on my show became my clients. It hadn't really occurred to me that people who came on the show might become clients. In retrospect, it makes total sense. A person comes on the show, has a great time. We distribute it on social media, bring attention to their story and business. The next logical step for some guests is, how else can we work together? There wasn't really any hard sell technique or sales trick. It was very natural and organic and led to us attracting amazing clients. To this day, many of the guests who come on our shows eventually become clients. They might have us launch their podcasts or use us for production with their existing podcasts. Some have become PR clients and we handle their press releases and secure tier 1 media placements. Many have gone through our personal brand accelerator, where I lead a cohort of individuals through an 8-week program designed to help them build and monetize their personal brands. The point is, if you design an experience that leaves your guests content and pleased they came on your show, they are more likely to get what they need from you than if you approach them cold. Suddenly, my calendar for in-person appearances began to fill up. I'm not the type of person who gets FOMO, fear of missing out, when I see an event on social media that I wasn't invited to. I'm happy when I'm cozy at home, relaxing. But I do recognize that attending the right events and being in high-level rooms can lead to new business and opportunities. As a financial advisor, I paid to attend events and spent thousands of dollars on galas and dinners. As my status grew, my own version of a VIP lifestyle began to develop. It's almost like I crossed over to the other side of influencers who are invited, given all access, and don't have to pay for entry. It took me a while to realize what was happening, but it makes sense. An event owner or producer knew that if they could get me to attend, I would share it with my network, feature it in my newsletter, and create content around the event on social media. For free admission and dinner, it was a steal for them. What I just described eventually became a profit center for our company. Now, some of those same event producers have become sponsors based on the results they have achieved with us in the past, building awareness around their events. Key takeaways. Starting a podcast is the most time-efficient way to create consistent content without spending a lot of time in the creative process. A percentage of the guests who come on your show will organically become clients if they need your products. Launching a podcast can upgrade your lifestyle to VIP status. If done properly, appearances can become a profit center for your business. Chapter 7. Podcasting without pressure. Before we get into how to launch your podcast, we need to address the number one killer of shows: extremely high expectations. Let me be clear. I'm not saying not to have expectations or to lower them. I'm explaining that setting proper expectations will ensure long-term success. Most hosts put too much pressure on themselves by not understanding the business they're in, and many assume their podcast will make international news the first episode. The last thing you want to do is have a false start by putting your time and energy into a show only to quit before reaping the benefits. Understanding that by starting a podcast, you are entering a race against yourself, nobody else. The only way you can lose is if you quit. Where people get confused is that they think it's a sprint when, in fact, it's a marathon to be run over the course of many years. This mindset takes all the pressure off. As mentioned earlier, through my role as co-founder of Mission Matters, we've launched over 250 shows for our clients. As a host, I've recorded more than 6,000 episodes, hosting 10 plus shows in my career. Through these experiences, I've worked with almost every personality type, both from the producer's side of things and as a host. When I make that racing analogy, most people confuse the type of race they're running. It's because I've seen this mistake play out hundreds of times. Here is a scenario of a sprinter mindset as it relates to podcasting. They want to win the race fast, launch and succeed immediately. The pressure is on. The host falls in love with an idea. It's the most unique idea for a show on the planet. There has never been a show that does this exact same angle and format. Maybe the host has a following, maybe they don't. Doesn't really matter. The host is in their head and gets wrapped up in the creative side of launching a show. Emotions and expectations are high. They tell all their friends about the idea. Even more pressure is on now because they have the expectation of others to deal with. Everyone thinks this will be the next big thing. They launch the show, and whether they get 100 or 1,000 downloads, they are usually left feeling disappointed that they aren't immediately in the top 10 podcasts. How could their idea not make headlines? All that self-imposed pressure is not necessary. Due to the sprinter's mindset, which would expect a show to grow from week to week, most podcasters don't appreciate what is actually taking place when a person listens to an episode. I'm not trying to lower your expectations. I'm trying to educate you on the commitment a listener makes. Consider this. If a host gets 10 downloads on a 1-hour episode, it means 10 hours of life were spent with your show. In that same scenario, 100 downloads is equivalent to 100 hours of life that was spent listening to you and your show. That is a blessing and should be cherished. Those listeners spent valuable time listening. What was the opportunity cost? Well, they could have watched a Netflix episode that cost $500,000 to produce with that valuable hour, or they could have watched a movie that cost millions to make. Cherish every download. Imagine that each download is a person in the audience of an in-person speaking engagement. If you have 500 downloads, that is equivalent to standing in front of 500 people and giving a keynote speech. It's amazing. Another sprinter mindset mistake is comparing the dopamine hits received from the instant feedback loop of other platforms like Instagram and TikTok to podcasting. This is even worse because it's misdirected pressure. So you may feel bad even though you are winning. Building on the example above, 100 downloads is equivalent to 100 hours spent with your show by 100 people. On Instagram or TikTok, 100 hearts do not equal 100 hours of time spent. I'll make a comparison and be liberal on the assumption that people are actually watching entire 1 to 10 minute videos on Instagram or TikTok. Creators know that it's highly unlikely that 100% of people who like a reel watch the entire video. Imagine that you receive 100 hearts on Instagram or TikTok for a 1-minute reel. Let's pretend that 100 hearts equals 100 minutes. Simple. 100 minutes equals 1.6 hours of life spent consuming your content. Compare that to 100 downloads on a podcast for a 1-hour episode, which is equivalent to 6,000 minutes. Those 100 downloads are connected to a core fan base who are willing to give you more of their time and energy. To the tune of 100 minutes on TikTok or Instagram versus 6,000 minutes on the podcast platform. Comparing results from Instagram or TikTok to podcast downloads dilutes the true value of a download and the amount of life listeners are investing in the host content. What does a marathon mindset look like, and how does it alleviate pressure as it relates to podcasting? When I coach new podcast hosts, the first thing I tell them is to start thinking in terms of 5 or 10-year increments, because the length of time it will take to grow your show could take a decade, and an elaborate show format isn't always necessary, especially since many shows will change formats and even names prior to hitting their real stride. This is normally a big letdown for the new hosts. They are all excited by an idea nobody has ever thought of, and then I burst their bubble and tell them that I'd rather have them start with a simple show format to get them comfortable behind the mic. I also tell them I want to take the pressure they are likely placing on themselves off their shoulders. I want them to settle in for the long haul because the key to growth is longevity. My goal is to make them consider that they are marathon runners, and I don't want them to expend all their energy in the first leg of the race, especially when life gets in the way. Because life will get in the way at some point 100% of the time. Whether it's a new baby, spouse, job, business, death in the family, or a long list of other reasons, something will happen. One of my favorite tools in the Keep It Simple toolbox is what I like to call the Goldilocks dilemma of podcasting. And it's based on the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears. In the story, Goldilocks enters the home of the 3 bears, tries their porridge, chairs, and bed, and finds one of each that is just the right fit. In business, this alludes to the conditions needing to be just right for something to succeed. Goldilocks dilemma of podcasting definition. Here's the definition as defined by me. Goldilocks dilemma of podcasting. For a podcaster to continue their show long enough to build an audience and reap the rewards of podcasting, the conditions must be just right. Otherwise, the energy spent on podcasting will be distributed elsewhere. Here's a breakdown of the Goldilocks dilemma of podcasting. Scenario number 1. Business is too hot. A podcaster is experiencing rapid growth in their core business or changes in their personal life. They don't have time to spend on their podcasts. Common excuses for quitting include, it's a new show and it's not like I'm making any money yet. It is a waste of time and I could spend that growing my business even further. I'll start again in the future when I have more time. Scenario number 2. Business is too cold. podcaster is losing business and needs to solve the problem fast or risk causing real harm to their lifestyle and the ones they love. Time has now become crucial. All energy needs to be focused on figuring out how to attract new business or correct their financial situation. Common excuses for quitting include, I don't have time. I need to find new customers. I need to make money now. I can't wait any longer for this show to make money. Scenario number 3, business is just right. A podcaster has the right balance of business growth and family life. Everything is working. They are on schedule and spending the amount of time originally planned on the project. Life is not surprising them. It's important to note that I have only met one podcaster who falls into this category. He planned meticulously, but then decided to have another child and quit after 3 years despite his show being monetized and successful. Even if you fit in this category now, things can change. This breakdown may seem a bit harsh. It's understandable that someone who needs to feed their family shouldn't be worrying about podcasting. Or if business is too good, then they need to ride that wave because it's important to capitalize on the good times, right? Not exactly. My solution is to avoid playing the Goldilocks dilemma game altogether. How do you do that? First, determine the length of the marathon you're running. For me, it's for life. For others, I recommend a minimum of 10 years. Also, keep your show format simple in the beginning. It decreases the chance that you will quit. Make your show something that you could do in your sleep and give yourself years to ratchet up the production. In the next chapter, I'll give you strategies on how to launch and maintain your show efficiently, which will allow for long-term success regardless of what's going on in life. Key takeaways. Set proper expectations and understand that being a podcaster is a long-term pursuit that should be planned in 10-year increments. Understand that the podcasting format is special and the audience who listens to your show is investing valuable hours of their life into your content. This time could be spent elsewhere, such as watching Netflix or a blockbuster movie. Be grateful for the listeners you have. Create a show format that is manageable for the marathon you signed up for because it's very likely your show will evolve in content, scope, and possibly even name. This takes the pressure off, so you don't have to waste all your energy at the beginning of the race. Chapter 8, A Podcaster's Blueprint to Getting Started. In the previous chapter, I stressed the importance of thinking in 5-year increments or even longer as it relates to your podcasting career. I'm going to assume that because you're still reading, you've bought into this concept. We now move on to the next crucial step, creating a vision for your podcasting journey. I don't think this needs to be a difficult or time-consuming task. It doesn't matter how clear your vision is in the beginning. It will evolve as time goes on. Podcasts evolve just as businesses and relationships do. Change is guaranteed, but you need a starting point. Start by answering the following 3 simple questions. Question number 1. What do you want out of your show? Do you want to be a world-class podcaster, hobbyist, earn cash on the side, or go full-time? Do you want to be rich and famous? Are you doing this for a legacy and to pass wisdom down? Be honest with yourself. Question number 2. What are you willing to give up to achieve your podcasting goals? How much time and money do you plan on investing in this pursuit? How many years are you willing to commit resources to your show? Question number 3. What will your life look like when you achieve your podcasting goals? Will you travel more and cover live events? Do you want to spend more time on hobbies? Will you turn your show into a media empire? Are you using it to boost your career or get a new job? Is your show part of an inheritance left to your children? Ideally, you'll have 3 solid paragraphs with lots of ideas from answering the above questions that will feed into your ever-evolving vision. Some may want to whittle down those paragraphs into a nice, concise vision statement, but that isn't mandatory. The important part of completing the above exercise is that now you can course correct or readjust based on changing expectations and potentially an evolving vision to make sure there's alignment in your podcasting experience. For example, maybe you start with the vision of being a hobbyist but fall in love with the craft and decide a full-time career in podcasting is the goal. After that realization, you'll need to reevaluate how you answered questions 2 and 3 above. The commitment and time required to be a hobbyist versus a full-time professional podcaster are significantly different. As your vision and plans evolve, so too will the steps to achieve them. Now that your vision is written down, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of launching your show. In this book, I won't dive too far into the hosting platforms and equipment. However, if you look in the show notes, there's a list there and you can find all the equipment and all of the softwares that I used for our show. So you definitely have the resources. Next, let's examine the 3 core principles I've developed over my career in this business for launching and maintaining a podcast. The 3 core principles of podcasting. Principle number 1. Start with a simple show concept. In the last chapter, I made the argument that by creating a simple show concept, you're more likely to stick with your show long enough to reap the benefits due to the Goldilocks dilemma. While true, it's not the core principle behind why it's important to start with a simple show concept. The reason you want to start simple is so the audience can get better acclimated to your voice and style. Think of yourself as a painter. If you start with a blank canvas and slowly add design elements over time, one day you have a masterpiece. But if you start with a fully finished painting and attempt to create a design by subtracting what is already on the canvas, it will be much harder to craft your masterpiece. Here's an example of my earliest show format. I still use a variation of this format for some of my shows, but with many nuances and subtleties that have given my canvas color and life while I continue the process of crafting my masterpiece. Simple 3-part show format. Beginning. Ask the guest their origin story or how they got started in business. Middle. Ask the guest about current trends in their industry and what they are seeing. End. Ask the guest what is next for them in business and their vision for the future. This may seem too simple for some, but it's how I got started. From variations of that 3-part formula, I was able to use my natural curiosity to start the conversation, give it a direction, then ask follow-up questions, which gave my show a very specific feel and a style that has evolved over the years. I'll give you an example of a core element that was added to my original 3-part formula. Long-term listeners know that for the last couple of thousand episodes, I start each episode with the Mission Matters Minute. Here's the structure. At Mission Matters, our goal is to amplify the stories of business owners, executives, and entrepreneurs. That's our mission. Then I ask the guest the simple question, what mission matters to you? At which point the guest will answer with their heartfelt mission. This addition adds structure to our podcast canvas, bringing me closer to a masterpiece. But I didn't add that stroke or design element until after hundreds of episodes, by which time I'd become much more comfortable in my host role. When I added it, I knew it was right, and now my audience expects it to be that way. Something as simple as adding a question that specifically lets people talk about their passions allows the audience to hear their passion and enthusiasm before ever hearing their story. Principle number 2. Create a schedule you can follow long term. There's no right or wrong way to create a recording schedule in podcasting. My suggestion is to pick a schedule and then alter it as needed. Iterate and adapt as needed. Below are some of the methods for recording a show that will release 52 episodes yearly that I've seen work in the past. Each has its pros and cons. One best practice is to record on the same day and time each week to create a habit, preferably when you are the most relaxed and focused. For example, if Friday afternoons are light, you may want to cap off the week by recording a podcast episode. If you're interviewing guests on your show, it can become tricky to accommodate guests' recording time and date preferences, but an effort should be made to be consistent. Before I became a full-time podcaster, I recorded only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Because I knew when I'd be recording, it allowed me to get into a rhythm and prepare mentally the night before a big recording day. Here are some sample podcast recording schedules. Record once weekly. Recording every week allows you to get into a rhythm. In terms of content, you may also be able to add more current events into your show if it's appropriate, without the topics becoming old news yet. An example of this schedule would be to block off time every Tuesday afternoon between 4 and 5 p.m. Record semi-weekly. It will be necessary to record multiple episodes within each session if you choose to only record twice a month. This can be very time efficient, especially if you schedule the interviews back to back. An example of this schedule would be to block off time from 1 to 3 p.m. every other Friday to record 2 30 to 45-minute episodes. Record once monthly. Recording once a month can be extremely time efficient because it only requires you to block off 4 hours once a month. Beginners may find it a bit difficult. Going an entire month without recording your show can make it harder to improve and also more difficult to find your natural podcasting rhythm. If you're referencing current events, some of the information may be outdated by the time the episodes are released. The real benefit of recording monthly is that you only need to record your show 12 times a year to have a weekly show. An example of this schedule would be to block off time every first Thursday of the month between 1 and 5 p.m. to record. Vacations and leaves of absence. If you are going on a vacation or a leave of absence, it is crucial that you record and schedule episodes in advance to be released on schedule before you leave. Do not put your show on hiatus or miss a week when it comes to releasing episodes. Podcast listeners are creatures of habit, and just as your original listeners may have fallen into the habit of listening to your show every week, they can just as easily fall into the habit of listening to someone else's show. In podcasting, much like in many businesses, consistency is key. Principle number 3, production must align with your vision. In the beginning, keep the production simple. For example, I started with an audio-only show recorded virtually and really honed that craft. If possible, hire a team like Mission Matters Podcast Agency, which handles all the heavy lifting like editing and distribution. I found that the technical aspects of running a show, such as editing, can bog down a podcast host unless you enjoy that type of work and have time. Initially, I edited my own show. In retrospect, that was a mistake. Those hours spent editing could have been spent recording new episodes and honing my craft as a podcaster. Remember, my goal was to become a world-class podcaster, not a world-class editor. Once I had my team in place, I was ready to add complexity and additional production to my show. Remember, I wasn't a quick study, and podcasting didn't come easy to me. As stated earlier in this book, it was only after 1,500 episodes that I eventually added a virtual video interview option to my show. After 3,000 episodes, I finally began doing in-person interviews. After 4,000 episodes, I began recording live on stage in front of an audience. Create your own vision and pace to meet your personal goals. On the way to becoming a world-class podcaster, I incorporated various interview formats and audience experiences that will collectively enhance the production value of my show, aligning it with my vision and aspirations. But this took time to accomplish, and I still have even bigger aspirations, bigger stages and bigger audiences, but I'm not in a rush, and you shouldn't be either. Don't put too much pressure on yourself or the process of getting better. In Finding Nemo, Dory famously encouraged Marlin to continue the search for his lost son Nemo by singing, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. If you ever get down on your podcasting journey, I would encourage you by saying, just keep recording, just keep recording, just keep recording. The rest will work itself out over time. Quitting is the only way to fail. Just keep recording. As mentioned before, in the show notes, you're going to see a link to the podcasting equipment that I recommend, and then you'll also see the hosting platform that I recommend. It's called Transistor. They have fair pricing and great distribution, so again, check them out. It's Transistor in the show notes. Key takeaways. Write down the vision for your podcasting journey. It's not enough to have a picture in your head. Get it down on paper. Keep your show concept simple in the beginning. You can always add complexity down the line as your show and your voice develop. Your recording schedule and cadence matter. Pay attention to this and plan a manageable workload so you don't burn out or quit. Though your vision may be big, don't rush the process. Allow your show and skill set to evolve over time and ensure the production value follows suit. Chapter 9, Monetizing Your Podcast the Smart Way. One of the top questions I receive is, how do I monetize my show? For obvious reasons, this is on the minds of seasoned podcasters and newbies alike. However, I feel that many people complicate the process and underestimate the value exchange that takes place when monetizing. First, let me tell you the number one reason why shows don't monetize. The host doesn't ask anyone for money. You might think I'm kidding, but I'm not. If you are reading this and have not monetized your content, I'm almost certain that you have not asked anyone for money. In all fairness, most podcasters don't understand the actual value exchange they bring to the table. To explain monetizing your show, I first want to reframe your thinking about your show and its real value. Monetizing your show is a simple case of supply and demand. There is only one you. There are millions of potential guests, sponsors, and collaborators who could find value through your show. Put another way, you can reach millions that need you, but there is only one you hosting the show. You are rare. You are special. You are a very limited edition. There will only be one of you ever made. You must accept the above as fact to really monetize and understand your worth. The error is that most people do the exact opposite of what I'm recommending. Podcasters often commoditize themselves unintentionally because they don't understand their true value in the marketplace. Here is an example of the incorrect logic many podcasters allow into their psyche. I have a podcast about investing, but there are thousands of podcasts on investing. Why would anyone want to invest in my show? It's small and I'm just starting out. Here is what that podcaster doesn't get. How many shows about investing are hosted by that person? 1. The exact value that podcaster offers is only available through one show. That show. It's rare. Hopefully now you understand the supply and demand argument as it relates to the show host. Now let's explore inventory. Inventory refers to what you will sell. This could take multiple forms, but for simplicity, let's define inventory as the quantity of episodes. There is a finite amount of inventory or episodes that a host can or will monetize. Building on the previous example, millions of potential buyers, and in the case of a podcast, 52 episodes a year, assuming the podcaster records a weekly show. If a podcaster produces a daily show, that is still only 365 episodes a year with millions of potential buyers. No matter how you look at it, inventory is scarce. Creating a podcast can be one of the best long-term businesses in terms of supply and demand alone. There will only ever be one of you, and it's unlikely you will ever have more inventory than 365 episodes a year. Notice, I haven't mentioned downloads, reach, demographic, or any of the other buzzwords people throw around when thinking about monetizing. Why? Because they don't matter in the beginning. I've seen shows monetize with 0 downloads, 0 episodes, and even 0 experience. How? Simple. The show host pitched a potential advertiser in the investing space on becoming a lead sponsor for their show. In exchange, the host would read an ad at the beginning of each episode. The person bought the concept, cut a $5,000 check, and the show was able to launch. The real question here isn't whether you can monetize. The question is, how many people are you willing to ask for money to make your show profitable? Only you can answer that one. Now that you understand how rare you are, how limited your inventory is, and that supply and demand are working in your favor, let's get into the mechanics of packaging your inventory and value. I'll explain these monetization strategies in the order that I was able to accomplish them. The first way I was able to monetize my show was to charge guests to be featured. Monetization strategy: charge guests for appearances. Paying to be a featured guest is controversial to some, while for others, it's not a big deal. When I started in this business, I was completely naive, and I didn't even know that this might be an issue. When I meet with my lawyer, I pay for his time. Same with my dentist. When I was a financial advisor, people paid me for my time. It didn't even occur to me that people shouldn't pay to be on a show. It was only after I was miseducated by people in this business that I learned guests might have an issue paying for appearances. This backwards, outdated logic is why local news and media are dying. That is another topic for another book, but understand, it's okay to pay to come on a show. Here is my logic. Someone always pays for the show. It could be the host, the guest, a sponsor, or an advertiser, but someone is paying and nothing is free. When I first charged guests, it was because that was the only way I could fund the show. I wasn't in a position to fund thousands of episodes with 0 money coming in for production. Put another way, if it were not for those guests paying, Mission Matters might not exist, and you wouldn't be holding this book right now. When you think about it this way, what do you think? I still charge a fee to come on the show. I've subsidized the fee, and it's way below the market rate I could charge, but this is part of my giving back to an industry that has given me so much. People in the know and media insiders understand the truth in my words and are probably slightly upset that I included this in the book. For example, if a guest pays a PR person to pitch them to get them on shows free, they are still paying. They paid the PR person. The money came out of the guest's pocket, period. If a guest pays the shows directly, they are still paying. No matter what, someone always pays. Skeptics might think this is just another way for me to make money or promote. I'm okay with both opinions because I am rare, just like you, and we both have limited inventory. Don't waste time on the opinions of others or things you can't control when it comes to monetizing. That time and energy should be spent pitching. In fact, here's my shameless pitch. In the show notes, you're going to see a link there. If you want to come on the show, I'd love to have you on. Click on it and fill out the application. Monetization strategy: sponsorships. The next major evolution in monetization was securing sponsors. I'm considering launching a mastermind course on creating and selling sponsorship packages because I've created over 100 decks throughout the years, perfecting and tweaking pitches. Send me a DM on Instagram if you're interested in learning more. Ask Adam Torres on Instagram. The challenge in selling sponsorships is to clearly communicate why a sponsor should do business with you. I should note that when I talk about selling sponsorships, I mean selling them directly to the sponsor for a value set by the host. This is not really industry standard, and I don't use the traditional sales approach. I feel the traditional method greatly undervalues the host and shows that are just getting started. Here's why. Podcast advertising is normally priced using CPM or per 1,000 downloads. Rates range from $10 to over $50 CPM, depending on the ad placement, show size, niche, and other factors. If you're paid at a rate of $25 CPM and an episode gets 1,000 downloads, you get paid $25. That doesn't move the needle for most. It might seem like an impossible task to make substantial money from advertisers with a small show, but I disagree. When my show was just getting started, I got creative. I added in-person appearances and site visits for my advertisers. From time to time, I'd bring on the CEO of a company who was advertising with me to give them a spotlight. I even had one advertiser who began doing a monthly appearance. We added their logo on the podcast cover, created graphics, and then posted on social media, thanking our advertisers for making the show possible. We did whatever it took to ensure the advertiser knew their business was like gold to us. The key here is to assess the advertiser's needs and design a solution around what they are looking to accomplish. Obviously, we weren't able to sell everyone we pitched, but we weren't looking for everyone. We were looking for advocates and long-term partners who believed in our show and its future. I want to take a slight detour here to prove to you that what I'm saying above isn't something rare and it's duplicatable, even with a smaller or new show. I stumbled upon this insight while working as a financial advisor. Early in my career, I landed a big client. It was my first multi-million-dollar client, and I was still a rookie in the business. I asked the client point blank, "Why would you invest with me? Your portfolio is big enough that anyone would love to work with you." I'll never forget that client's answer. He said, "That is true. The most successful advisors would work with me, but those advisors also have bigger fish than me. I'd get forgotten as they attract bigger and bigger fish. I'm looking for a long-term relationship. I know that I will be a priority for you, and as you grow, so will our relationship. But you won't forget that I believed in you from the beginning." That client taught me a valuable lesson early in my career. Sometimes what is perceived as a setback, such as being new or inexperienced, can actually be your greatest advantage. If I were a top advisor when I met that client, I wouldn't have gotten his business. Now, was this client the needle in the haystack? Maybe, but you only need one. You don't need the whole haystack. Just pick that needle out and remain grateful and loyal. To illustrate this point further, I've grandfathered the rates we charge to some of our original advertisers at rates that are ridiculously low by any industry standard. I also endorse products for them. I create special opportunities, introductions, and rarely say no to in-person appearance requests unless I absolutely cannot. They gave me a shot. Monetization strategy, affiliate marketing. Charging appearance fees and sponsorships are my top two methods of monetizing that I have personally experienced as of the publishing of this book. Getting creative allows for countless opportunities to pitch value in exchange for getting a check. However, there is another method that I'll explain as an option which I am only currently beginning to explore: affiliate marketing. Affiliate marketing can be a great long-term approach to generating passive income. The structure and execution of the strategy are simple. A host signs a deal with a company to advertise their product. The host reads ads and promotes the product, usually providing a personalized link to buy it. The host gets paid when someone purchases the product through their link. For a small show, this might be a difficult road to go down, considering a smaller listener base will likely lead to fewer sales than a larger listener base, assuming the target market remains the same. I wanted to bring up this route because it can be a good long-term method for generating income. For example, if I had an affiliate deal in place and advertised on my earlier catalog years ago, I might still be making sales from those old episodes because they still receive downloads. Therefore, there is still a potential that someone could be making purchases through an affiliate link if I had implemented that strategy from the beginning. If you go that route, my suggestion is to align yourself with the product, brand, and company you believe will be in business long-term and honor its affiliate program. It's a long-term proposition, so evaluate the decision of whom you work with carefully. You should also believe in the company and the product. Selling is more authentic when you do. Now that you know how to monetize, it's time to focus on growing your show. Key takeaways. Most people don't monetize early because they don't pitch their show to people who might pay them. They don't ask for the sale. It's okay to charge guests to come on your show. You're spending your time and effort on promoting the guest, and it's okay to get paid for that service. It can be a reciprocal relationship. When you land an advertiser, treat them like gold. Be loyal and allow them to participate in the growth of your show, especially those early supporters. Chapter 10. Grow your show from the ground up. Before you conquer the world, tell your friends, family, and peer network about your show. If you are reading this, have launched a show, and are under 100 downloads per month, I doubt your peer network even knows your show exists. In most cases, it's not your fault. Maybe you never promoted a show or anything to your network. You might be under the false impression that when you tell your friends that you have a podcast once at the tail end of a conversation, they'll drop everything and tune in. Wrong. Don't take it personally. It's not that your friends don't want to support you. They aren't tuning in because they're busy, just like you are. Just because this new podcasting journey has become important to you and is increasingly becoming a priority, it doesn't mean your circle is being unsupportive when they don't listen. You need to earn their trust, just as your favorite host earned yours, causing you to listen consistently. How is this trust earned over time without becoming annoying? First, make it a point to tastefully work your podcast into conversations. For example, when your uncle asks, "How have you been?" you can say, "I'll tell you, Uncle, I just had a great guest on my podcast. I can't get it off my mind," and then finish the story. You want to pique the interest of the person you are talking to and to link the conversation tastefully to your show and a guest they would find interesting. I've done this with certain family members, and it took me years to win them over. Was it worth it? Absolutely. They have become some of my biggest fans, supporters, and super spreaders of the show. I'm adding value to their lives, and they are spreading that value to others naturally, organically, and most importantly, authentically. This should be your mindset when it comes to growing a show. For this strategy to work, ideally, you will associate your identity with your show and its output. This is much simpler than you may think, and a side effect is that it adds social pressure to maintaining a show. If you go around telling people about your show, it's less likely that you'll quit. As I've mentioned throughout this book, we are running a marathon, not a sprint. The life-sustaining water needed during this race includes social pressure. In the uncle example above, it would be crushing to have your uncle finally ask you how the show was going and then have you respond with, "I quit." The only way you can fail to grow your show is by quitting. Don't quit and your show will grow. Once you accept and link your identity with that of being a podcaster, you'll be ready to promote your show to your extended peer group. Almost every profession promotes itself in one way or another. When someone graduates from law school and begins practicing law, they are lawyers. A person who graduates from medical school and begins practicing medicine is a doctor. Though you may have no formal training, you must link your identity to being a podcaster. Only then will you be able to absorb podcasting into your lifestyle. At a dinner party, a lawyer usually at least mentions law, whether we want them to or not. Same with a doctor discussing medicine. Many times, someone else is asking the doctor for medical advice, whether the doctor wants to talk about it or not. The same should be true for your identity as a podcaster, and it will be if everyone you know or meet knows about your show. Assuming you have mentally accepted that you are a podcaster and that title is just as important as any other professional title you may hold, CEO, teacher, CPA, financial advisor, entrepreneur, etc., it's time to consider how to leave a lasting impression. I've given my potential listeners an emotional experience through a conversation and telling them a story that derived from the show. Now I want to give them something tactile, something they can feel and hold. I mean, of course, I want to give them a promotional item they can take with them. What I give people in person has evolved over time. In the beginning, I had business cards printed, which were cheap and a good way to generate downloads. I made sure the design included a large QR code that would direct people to my show. When I was a part-time podcaster and still working as a financial advisor, I found that over time, I was handing out my podcast business card far more often than my financial advisor business card. Why? Because people wanted that one more, and it was a more interesting conversation starter in public spaces. From this experiment, I also found that I earn more financial advisory clients by handing out my podcast card because people want to do business with those they like. Strangers liked funny and entertaining podcast host Adam as a first impression more than they like serious financial advisor, let's talk about the markets, Adam, which brought pressure to the conversation. The podcast card is a Trojan horse of sorts. Don't believe me? Try it yourself. The podcast business card eventually evolved into a 4x6 card that I'd hand out at events and in more formal settings where promotion was appropriate. Think trade shows, conferences, and other public spaces where it's not possible to have extended conversations with hundreds or even thousands of people. These interactions are faster, so it's important to have a larger card where more information can be printed. The card is designed to pique the interest of the person it is given to, providing enough information to encourage them to scan the QR code, resulting in a download and possibly a new subscriber. I had two bases covered: a small business card that could be handed out everywhere and a larger card with more information for a systemized, scaled approach to in-person promotion. I was still missing something though. Making an emotional connection at scale was still missing in my toolkit. When you think about promotion, creating an emotional connection is the ultimate goal when handing out items at a booth. A notepad, pen, magnet, piggy bank, or bottle opener might do the trick. You will see these items handed out by the thousands at any conference. The more creative and useful the item, the more likely a person will remember and or call on the person who gave it to them for whatever product they are selling. For me, I wasn't necessarily selling anything. Podcast content is free to listen to for the most part, unless a host creates gated content. I experimented with coasters, which were actually pretty cool, and lapel pins, which were also fun, but I was looking for a souvenir, something I could give people when I walk off stage and they thank me for my performance. I wanted something I could keep in my pocket at any time. I'm not suggesting everyone do this, but for me, it worked. A poker chip was the answer. The idea came to me when Brad Turner booked me for his yearly Las Vegas investor conference. One of my dreams is to one day have a Las Vegas residency, so I'm always thinking of ways to stand out in that market. I was searching for promotional items randomly, and a branded poker chip became an obvious choice. I didn't know how people would receive a poker chip with my face on it. I gave it a shot, and the response far exceeded anything I could have imagined. Saying people were smiling would be an understatement. They began holding them up in pictures, both with and without me. I was tagged on social media by people holding the poker chips. It was a hit. Bingo. I never saw a smile like that from handing someone a business card. I've since handed out thousands of these chips worldwide. If you'd like a Mission Matters podcast poker chip, send me a DM and I'll mail you one free. Ask Adam Torres on Instagram. I'm considering adding commemorative editions to give out at special events. The ideas are endless. What good are promotional items if they're staying in a box in your car trunk or garage? They have zero value if you don't get them in the hands of the people who can benefit from your content. To avoid that trap, I've designed a life in a way that makes it hard for me not to promote my show. I have a stack of poker chips with my face on it, branded business cards, and boxes of flyers all promoting my show by my front door. I never leave the house without promotional materials in my pocket. I personally hand out the poker chips, cards, and flyers by the thousand. If you have met me in person, you likely received some type of promotional item from me, possibly the book that you're holding in your hands. You will know if you are executing this strategy right when your friends and entire peer group begin asking you about your show every time they see you. Over time, if you execute well, your show will take on a life of its own. By promoting local, small shows, they can become truly global. People will start approaching you to take selfies and ask for autographs randomly. You will start to see people posting pictures with signs of your show and a lot of other things that I couldn't have imagined when I started this podcasting journey. Remember, I was a financial advisor with zero training on being a professional host or growing a show. You can do this too. It's not rocket science. Execute the strategies in this book, and podcasting will give you more than you ever imagined. We've talked about in-person or offline promotion, which I believe should be at the core of your strategy. It's time to introduce online or digital promotion. Note, I've just begun monetizing my international appearances in a meaningful way, so I won't include a chapter in the book on this topic as I don't consider myself a subject matter expert yet, but I'm learning and I'm excited to share the nuances of going global. In fact, that might be a book in itself. If you think I should write this, email me at adamtorres@missionmatters.com. Key takeaways. Talk about your show with your friends, family, and peers. Add value by sharing moments or guests from the show that you think they would be interested in. Associate your identity as a podcaster with importance. In the same way a lawyer or doctor talks with seriousness about their profession, you are a podcaster. Be proud. Create promotional materials that can be handed out in person, such as a business card, 4-inch by 6 cards, branded poker chips, or whatever else your podcasting heart desires. Chapter 11, Your Digital Growth Engine. Artificial intelligence, AI, is moving at such a rapid pace that any digital strategies proposed here in relation to granular details like how often to post and what type of content is working would become obsolete before this is sent to the printer. In fact, human hosts are being replaced by AI hosts even as we speak. They come with lower costs and are easier to program. Perfect delivery. Don't worry, all these advances are opportunities for podcasters. For example, as mentioned previously in this book, we are planning a show hosted by an AI version of myself trained on my 6,000 episode catalog of content. Who knows, AI Adam might even build a larger audience. This might scare you to think about. It scares me for many other parts of society. But for podcasting, the gold mine that we are digging in as podcasters just got deeper, or the proverbial pie just got bigger. That being said, let's focus on the foundational 3 building blocks for long-term growth that will continue to remain relevant in the future. Building block, newsletters. My number one regret in my media career is not starting a newsletter sooner. I did not grasp the importance of owning a list of opted-in email newsletter subscribers. I always viewed the newsletter as something I'd, get around to when I had time. Well, time passed, and we didn't create a newsletter until we had been in business for almost 4 years. I can't imagine how much growth we missed in those crucial early years. How many downloads or subscribers did I miss out on? How many lost opportunities to connect with my audience did I miss? Thinking about this still causes me pain. Why is a newsletter so important? Ultimately, it's about the control in reaching your audience. When a podcaster sends a newsletter to their list, they have the ability to reach the majority of their subscribers. A good newsletter can achieve a delivery rate of 90% or higher. Compare this to the other forms of marketing, such as on social media. When you post on Instagram, you'll be lucky if 10% of your followers actually see your content in their feeds. Consider that for a moment. If you're lucky, 10% of your followers will see your content on Instagram. Every platform, even LinkedIn and Facebook, will only show your content to a small percentage of your followers. It makes sense though. Their job is to make money by showing ads and to keep the user engaged and on the platform as long as possible. It's not their job to promote your content. Well, it's not their job to promote your content unless you fork over advertising dollars to them. With a newsletter, you own that data. You decide what happens with it, and you only need to acquire the email address once, but will benefit from it as long as the person remains subscribed. Sending a weekly newsletter comes second only to releasing a weekly podcast episode. For newsletters, I recommend Aweber. They've been in business for 27 years. They're fairly priced and really easy to use. You'll find a link in the show notes. Click on that and go check them out. Building block, social media. Social media remains one of the most important ways to reach new audiences and to get people to take notice of your show. The layers of benefits continue to unfold over time. One example is that Instagram posts have gained new searchability importance on Google. This wasn't always the case. Creating a digital footprint on social media will continue to gain importance, but the core reasons don't change much. With so much to choose from, where do you start? Go where your audience is. My core audience has been business owners, entrepreneurs, and executives. It's not a stretch to say if I only created on LinkedIn, I'd have a good chance of reaching my audience. That is exactly what we did initially. We focused almost exclusively on LinkedIn to reach a new audience. As the show grew, we then began creating content for our Instagram pages, both personal at Ask Adam Torres and business at Mission Matters Business. Post where your core audience spends time, and then you can start exploring. Exploring for our shows currently includes creating content on TikTok at Ask Adam Torres. Increasingly, TikTok will become more important over time, and we don't want to get left behind. It's possible that our TikTok account could become one of the most valuable social media accounts on our platform. The main lesson here is to start with where your audience is and scale to additional platforms slowly. If you are repurposing content, maybe you can speed up the process. However, be sure to develop a strategy that is manageable and executable long term. If you need help doing this, consider hiring a team of professionals. You can connect with Mission Matters Social Media Agency by clicking on the link in the show notes. We'd love to have you. Building block, your show's website. The final core component of your digital footprint as it relates to your podcast is your website. Your website is your storefront. Whether you are seriously pursuing monetizing or you are a hobbyist, you need a website. Visualize your website as the hub of all of your strategies. Everything will stem from this central location. Your newsletter sign-up, social media links, bio, testimonials, sponsorship packages, blog, and much more will all live on your website. In fact, you might find yourself with an entire media platform distributing and producing shows for other hosts, which is exactly what happened to Mission Matters. In the early days, the only show distributed on our website was mine. Now, 9 years later, we've launched more than 250 shows, and our content is published every Monday through Friday. This has given us a strong presence in the overall industry, and as we deliver for our clients, hosts, and stakeholders, our brand continues to cement its legacy. If we didn't start with that original effort and simple website, none of what we are doing now would have been feasible. If you're interested in hiring an agency to build your website, Mission Matters can help. Just click on the link in the show notes. Up to this point, I provided you with a step-by-step guide on what I know works in the podcasting industry, building a show, and the future of podcasting. I've given you the best of what has worked for me, leaving out all the fluff and most of the failed experiments. I hope that I've also been able to influence your views on how you view yourself in the industry and the opportunities that are ahead of you should you choose to take part in this podcasting movement. The rest of the book will take a slightly different tone as I give my views while wearing my podcast futurist hat. I believe that there is a higher purpose to podcasting and our connection in creating content as human beings. Key takeaways: create a newsletter to reach your audience at will without succumbing to the will of other platforms and their algorithms. Take back control. Social media is still the ultimate marketing tool and cannot be ignored. If you are just starting, focus on platforms where your audience spends its time. Expand to other platforms when you feel comfortable. Your website will be the hub of your show, connecting all arms of your marketing efforts, including your podcast, social media, bios, and testimonials. Chapter 12, Podcasting for Legacy and Longevity. Podcasters who stick with their shows long-term may have the opportunity to pass down generational wealth to their families. Some will change the future of their lineage. Generational wealth can be defined as the money, assets, and knowledge that are passed down from one generation to the next. I bring this topic up because I want podcasters to think of their shows as assets. Assets hold value and can grow over time. In the case of a podcast, your asset includes the catalog of episodes, the profit centers built, and the brand. What podcasters need to realize is that their podcast is actually the foundation for their own media company and an inheritance to their descendants and should be treated as such. If you accept this shift in mindset and view your podcast as a media company, you will approach the journey differently. Throughout this book, I've talked about podcasting being a marathon. What if you are running this marathon for the future of your children or grandchildren? People often ask how I stay so consistent. How can I record so many episodes? For me, it's the simplest task in the world. I just need to think about how those who came before me paved the way for me to become a podcaster. I mentioned earlier in this book that I grew up in a not-so-friendly time on the southwest side of Detroit. When I think about what previous generations went through, I had it easy. My grandfather wasn't so lucky. When I was growing up, my family often told stories of my grandfather's beginnings and how he created opportunities for all his descendants. He left home when he was only a teenager and went into the world to earn a living. Why did he leave home so young? I'm told he didn't want to be another mouth to feed. In the area where he grew up in Mexico in his youth, many times people didn't have enough food to eat. It was a different time in Mexico with fewer opportunities. He didn't want to be a burden on his family. Many stories about my grandfather's life exemplify this, such as how he paid for his home with cash and never accepted a handout. Even in his later years, he remained distinct. I remember when he was in his 90s, he mentioned feeling guilty for living so long because other people could benefit from the money he was getting from Social Security. Mind you, he paid into the system and was a veteran. My grandfather passed down a wealth of character and knowledge and led by example, which is something I always aspire to. What he didn't leave were businesses and assets. I'm not complaining. Without him, there is no me. But knowing what I know now, there is no excuse for me not to leave substantial wealth to the next generation, especially considering this can be done simply by consistently recording a podcast. Never in history has great wealth been available with so few hurdles. A simple weekly activity that takes less time than going to the gym can change a life and a lineage. You may be wondering, how is this possible? To fully grasp the possibility, you must first understand that media compounds over time. A simple way to understand this concept is that the more episodes you record over time, the greater the chances of achieving higher downloads. More downloads means a larger audience and revenue. When you think about the greatest people in history who held the host title, people like Johnny Carson or Oprah, Larry King, they all completed more than 30,000 interviews in their career. Obviously, Oprah is still going strong and her body of work continues to expand. Long live Oprah! What do the greats have to do with you? They give you perspective. How big would your catalog be if you decided that you were going to record until you were physically unable to? Taking it a step further, what if you had a child or family member who would carry on the show into the next generation? How big would the catalog be then? I would argue that a podcaster who is starting today actually has an advantage over the biggest names of the past. Podcasters of today have distribution through Apple Podcasts and Spotify, which didn't exist in the past. Furthermore, they own their shows. They can retire when they choose. A network executive doesn't make that choice for them. Are you beginning to see the true possibilities? Assuming my health is strong and it's God's will for me to live a long life, I will be a centenarian podcaster, for sure. I can already visualize the shirt I'll be wearing in an Instagram post the day I turn 100 years old with those words proudly displayed across my chest. Following health trends and the longevity space closely, I'd love to be 100 years old, still doing my show. Some of you reading this might think I'm insane for saying this, but it's actually quite logical. When I was a financial advisor, many of my clients were in their 70s, 80s, and a few in their 90s. As people reach their 80s and 90s, many of their friends have passed. It can actually become quite lonely. Very early in my career, I recall having long phone conversations with some of my clients during holidays and times when you'd think they'd be with family. What do you do when everyone is passed and you want to hear a friendly voice? In this case, they would call me their financial advisor. But what if those clients had a podcast? What if they had been consistently recording for 30, 40, or even 50 years? How could this experience have enriched their lives and experiences? I'll take it even one step further. If we believe that being surrounded with fresh ideas, youth, innovation, and hope can keep a person connected to society and feeling a sense of purpose, then being a podcaster can extend someone's life expectancy. I didn't clear that statement with Elias Arjan, my go-to longevity expert, but I think it's obvious that incorporating positive habits is a good thing. Podcasting is a healthy habit. This can have positive mental health implications and enhance a person's quality of living, especially in later years. I can't imagine a scenario where I wouldn't want to have at least one conversation weekly with someone interesting. That is what we're really talking about. Having a minimum of one conversation weekly, recording it, and distributing that conversation for others to benefit from in the form of a podcast. Hopefully you're close to committing to a lifelong journey in podcasting, or at least open to the idea of it. I have one final call to action for you. You should podcast to uplift humanity and advance civilization. Key takeaways. Change your mindset to that of a business owner launching a media company versus a host launching a single podcast. You can change your future lineage by passing down generational wealth created through your podcast. Making the commitment to podcasting for the rest of your life can increase the quality of your life both now and in later years, possibly extending your lifespan. Conclusion. Make history. For thousands of years, history was controlled by a select few. Those with wealth, power, and an above-average level of intellect controlled the narrative. Going back to the earliest days, if you had access to scrolls and could read and write, you created history. More recently, Those who owned the printing presses decided which books would be published or which newspaper stories would be printed. Now, those at the helm of organizations like Facebook and TikTok dictate how the algorithms work that create the echo chambers that we experience daily. This one is the most dangerous because it makes us feel like we're in control. After all, we have the opportunity to post or participate in content creation. However, our actual participation is gamified and designed to keep us on platforms longer to view more ads. Remember when I mentioned a post on Instagram is likely to reach only 10% of your followers? Go back to chapter 11 if you need a refresher. Podcasting, on the other hand, is the great equalizer. I call podcasting the great equalizer because it puts everyone on the same level. Whether you are a kid from Southwest Detroit with few prospects for the future or come from a privileged family in Beverly Hills, the barrier to entry is the same. You can both hit the record button and you can both build a media empire. Most importantly, you can both contribute to writing history from your perspective. That history cannot be erased, and the more people that participate in this collective telling of stories, the closer we get to the truth and to advancing civilization. I don't accept that we have to make the same mistakes of the past because it's human nature to be a certain way. I believe it's possible that we can rise through a collective consciousness, fueled by the sharing of our stories and learning from one another. Once upon a time, we sat around campfires, learning from the stories told about that day's hunt and our ancestors. Now, the lessons from that day's hunt have taken a new form of possibility through podcasting. Everyone can participate and tell stories, even those who didn't have status or wealth, even a social worker. I often think about what it would be like if my mother had a podcast. She spent her career as a social worker working with at-risk youth, the forgotten ones, as she used to call them in private. These were kids who experienced living conditions that most in the United States didn't think existed in a place like Michigan. Mom passed away on October 9th, 2024 in Fort Pierce, Florida, at the age of 70 due to a tornado that took place during Hurricane Milton. The sight was something out of a movie. The home she was in was lifted into the air and thrown across the street. I still wonder what stories she would have told in her podcast. She would have spoken about compassion, preached forgiveness and understanding. She would have called out to the victims of abuse and violence and let them know it wasn't their fault. She would have spoken about her faith and her love of God. She would have told stories of her childhood. She would have let her wisdom accumulated over 40 years as a social worker for future generations to benefit from. This is priceless information that is now lost. This is what I mean. A career social worker from Detroit could help uplift humanity and advance civilization through sharing what she learned during her time on Earth. What would happen if we all did our part in sharing our experiences, perspectives, and knowledge through podcasting? If you have been waiting to start a show, stop waiting and do it now. If you have a show but aren't taking it seriously, stop playing around. What you are doing is bigger than you. Humanity needs you. Commit to making your show a lifelong pursuit. Pass down generational wealth to your descendants. You will not regret it. Join me in making 1 billion podcasts a reality. Though my mom didn't have her own show, I had the privilege of bringing her on my show multiple times. In the show notes is a link to what I like to call my mom's greatest hits, which are a series of interviews that I did with her. You will hear love and compassion in her voice. Also, she was hilarious. Enjoy.